Meadow Carter froze, staring at the positive pregnancy test trembling in her brown fingers, her heartbeat drowning out every thought but one. This can't be happening. 3 years. 3 years of being called barren, broken, defective by a man who'd sworn to love her. 3 years of watching him parade her younger sister, pale-skinned and fertile, as his mistress-turned-wife. 3 years of swallowing shame and rebuilding herself piece by agonizing peace in the shadows of Los Angeles, far from the wreckage of her old life. And now this. This impossible, miraculous, terrifying little plus sign that changed everything. Because the father wasn't her ex-husband, Ray, who'd discarded her like medical waste. No, the father was O Hajoon, Ray's uncle, the man Ray feared more than any other powerful person in the family, the Korean crime lord who'd taken one look at Meadow's broken pieces and decided she was worth putting back together. The man who made billionaires nervous and politicians sweat. The man whose child was now growing inside her body, making her a target for every enemy he'd ever made, and trust me, there were legions. Take a deep breath, besties. Before we dive deeper into this absolute chaos, I need you to drop a comment telling me where you're watching or listening from today. And if this is your first time here, kindly hit the subscribe button because this story is about to get so twisted, so intense, you'll need to watch it twice to catch everything. I promise you, the revenge that's coming will have you screaming at your screen. Now, let's rewind and see exactly how Meadow went from discarded wife to the woman carrying a mafia boss's heir. 3 years and 2 months earlier, Meadow had stood in the living room of their Calabasas estate, her entire world crumbling as Ray's lawyer slid divorce papers across the coffee table with the clinical efficiency of someone euthanizing a sick animal. Sign here, here, and initial here, the lawyer had said, not even bothering to look at Meadow's face. Why would he? She was just another failed wife, another woman who couldn't fulfill her biological purpose. Ray sat across from her, his jaw tight with what Meadow used to mistake for strength, but now recognized as simple cruelty. Next to him, perched on the arm of his chair like a trophy, was Sierra, Meadow's half-sister. 23 years old, honey-skinned where Meadow was deep mahogany, reed-thin where Meadow had curves, and according to the ultrasound photos Ray had so thoughtfully left on the kitchen counter that morning, 11 weeks pregnant with his child. I don't understand, Meadow had whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. We've only been married for 4 years. You promised we'd keep trying, that we'd see specialists that. I did try, Ray cut her off, his voice devoid of warmth. I wasted 4 years on a woman whose body doesn't work. For years of my life, Meadow. My prime years. And for what? So you could fail at the one thing women are biologically designed to do. The words had landed like physical blows, each one precisely aimed to destroy. Ray, please, Meadow reached for him, but Sierra's hand shot out, gripping Ray's shoulder possessively. Don't beg, Meadow. It's pathetic, Sierra said, her voice saccharine with false sympathy. Ray deserves a real woman. Someone who can give him children, carry on his legacy. You had your chance and your body rejected him. What did you expect him to do? Stay celibate because you're broken. Broken. The word had echoed in Meadow's skull like a death knell. How long? Meadow's eyes locked on her sister, the girl she'd helped raise after their mother died, the girl she'd paid for college, supported through every crisis. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? Does it matter? Sierra shrugged, utterly unrepentant. But, if you must know, about 18 months. Long enough for us to fall in love. Long enough for him to realize what he was missing being tied to you. 18 months. While Meadow had been going through fertility treatments, injecting hormones into her stomach, enduring painful procedures, praying every night for a miracle, her husband had been impregnating her baby sister. The settlement is generous, the lawyer continued, oblivious or indifferent to the devastation unfolding. $250,000, the car, and Ray has agreed not to pursue you for the money you spent on failed fertility treatments. All you need to do is sign the NDA, agree to never speak publicly about the marriage or the circumstances of the divorce, and vacate the property within 48 hours. $250,000. For 4 years of her life, for the humiliation, for the betrayal, for watching her husband father a child with her own sister. "I'm not signing," Meadow said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Ray's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Excuse me. I said I'm not signing. Not without a better settlement. Not without." "You'll sign, or I'll make sure you get nothing." Ray leaned forward, all pretense of civility evaporating. "I have lawyers, Meadow. Real lawyers, not the legal aid hack you'd be able to afford. I'll drag this out for years, cost you every penny you have in legal fees, and you'll still end up with nothing. Or you can sign now, take the money, and disappear with some dignity intact." "Dignity," Meadow laughed, the sound harsh and broken. "You want to talk about dignity while you sit there with my sister, with your pregnant mistress, in the home we built together?" "The home I paid for," Ray corrected coldly. "With my money in my name. You were always just a guest here, Meadow. I think deep down, you knew that. I married you because you were different, exotic, and my uncle liked you. But different gets old, and exotic doesn't pay the bills when you can't produce an heir. His uncle liked you." The word struck something in Meadow's memory. O Hajoon. Ray's mother's younger brother, the family ghost, the man who'd appeared at their wedding like a dark omen and disappeared just as quickly. The man whose reputation preceded him like a shockwave. "Does Hajoon know?" Meadow asked quietly. "Does he know what you're doing?" Ray's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You don't speak his name. You don't think about him. And you definitely don't contact him. That's in the NDA, Meadow. Any attempt to reach out to my family, to smear my name, to interfere in my life, and I see you into oblivion." So that's what she was worth. $250,000 and a gag order. Meadow had signed the papers with hands that didn't feel like her own. She'd packed her life into suitcases that couldn't hold even a fraction of who she'd been. And she'd left Calabasas in her rearview mirror, driving aimlessly until she'd ended up in Los Angeles proper, in a tiny studio apartment in Koreatown that cost a third of what her closet in the estate had been worth. The first month, she'd barely functioned. She ate when she remembered, slept when exhaustion dragged her under, and spent most of her time staring at walls, wondering how she'd become so thoroughly erased from her own life. The second month, something shifted. Meadow woke up one morning and realized she was angry. Not sad, not hurt, but furiously, righteously angry. She'd lost 4 years to a man who'd never valued her. She'd lost her sister to betrayal. But she still had herself, still had her MBA from Berkeley that she'd earned before Ray convinced her to be a stay-at-home wife, still had skills and intelligence and worth that existed independent of her womb. She'd started small, applying for positions, going to interviews, forcing herself to remember that she was more than Ray's discarded wife. And then, 3 months after the divorce, she'd walked into a gallery opening in downtown LA. An attempt to reclaim the art world she'd loved before marriage had consumed her identity. She'd been standing in front of a haunting piece, all shadows and crimson, when a voice behind her had said in perfect English tinged with Korean accent, "It's called the price of loyalty." Fitting, don't you think? Meadow had turned, and her breath had caught because standing behind her was O Hajoon, and he was nothing like she remembered from the wedding. 42 years old, devastatingly handsome in the way dangerous men often are, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent, with eyes that seemed to see straight through every defense she'd carefully constructed. "Mr. O," Meadow had stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Her heart hammered against her ribs because this man, Ray's uncle, shouldn't be here, shouldn't know she existed anymore, shouldn't be looking at her like she was something worth seeing. "Just Hajoon, please," he'd said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Mr. O makes me sound like a cartoon character, and I assure you I'm very real." He'd moved closer, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Meadow Carter. Or is it still Meadow Song? I can never keep track of what women do with names after my nephew destroys them." The casual acknowledgement of Ray's pattern, the way he said it like it was common knowledge, made Meadow's stomach clench. "I don't use his name anymore," she'd said, lifting her chin with a defiance she didn't quite feel. "I went back to Carter. Easier that way." Easier to erase, you mean, Hajoon had observed, not unkindly. Easier to pretend those 4 years didn't happen. That my nephew didn't use you up and throw you away like he does with everything beautiful that threatens his mediocre existence. Beautiful. The word had hung in the air between them like something forbidden. Why are you here? Meadow had asked, needing to redirect, needing to understand. Are you checking up on me for Ray? Making sure I'm following the NDA? Because I am. I haven't spoken to anyone about. I'm here, Hajoon interrupted smoothly, because I own this gallery. And 3 others in Los Angeles, 2 in San Francisco, and 1 in Manhattan's Upper East Side. Art is a passion of mine. Among other things. He'd paused, letting that information settle. I'm also here because I saw your name on the guest list and wondered if you'd have the courage to show up. Most of Ray's ex-wives hide. They disappear into quiet lives of shame, convinced they were the problem. But you, Meadow Carter, you came to an art opening alone, 3 months after divorce, in Koreatown of all places. That takes either courage or stupidity, and I don't think you're stupid. Most of Ray's ex-wives, Meadow had repeated, her voice hollow. How many are they? You were number 3, Hajoon said, matter of fact. There was Claire before you, discarded for gaining weight after a miscarriage. And Jessica before her, divorced for refusing to quit her career as a surgeon. My nephew has a pattern of marrying strong women and breaking them when they fail to meet his impossible standards. Usually with help from whatever young thing he's been grooming on the side. The confirmation that she'd been part of a pattern, not a unique failure, had hit Meadow like ice water. Clarifying. Infuriating. Why didn't you warn me? The words came out accusatory. At the wedding, you were there. You knew what he was. Why didn't you say something? Would you have listened? Hajoon had asked gently. You were 26 years old, in love, convinced that love conquered all. If I told you Ray was poison, you would have thought I was jealous or controlling or trying to sabotage your happiness. People don't believe warnings about the people they love. They have to learn through pain. He'd been right and Meadow hated that he'd been right. So why approach me now, she'd asked. What do you want, Hajoon? I want to offer you a job, he'd said simply. Curator for my LA galleries. $75,000 a year to start, full benefits, housing allowance. You have an MBA and an eye for art. I need someone who understands both business and beauty. Interested. It had sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. What's the catch? Meadow had asked suspiciously. There's always a catch with powerful men offering desperate women opportunities. Hajoon's smile had been sharp, appreciative. The catch is that working for me means entering my world, Meadow. And my world is not safe. I have enemies. People who would hurt you to hurt me. I have business dealings that exist in gray areas of legality. And I have a reputation that will follow you everywhere you go. People will assume you're my mistress, my property, my latest acquisition. Can you handle that? I handled being married to your nephew, Meadow had said, steel in her voice. I can handle rumors. Good. Hajoon had extended his hand. Then welcome to O Holdings, Miss Carter. I have a feeling you're going to surprise us both. That handshake had changed everything. Meadow had thrown herself into work with the desperation of someone who needed purpose more than air. She'd curated shows, managed acquisitions, networked with collectors who had more money than entire countries. And Hajoon had been there, not hovering, but present. Offering guidance without condescension, pushing her without breaking her, seeing potential she'd forgotten existed. 6 months into working for Hajoon, Meadow had accompanied him to a charity gala in Boston, Massachusetts, one of those obscene displays of wealth where people donated millions to feel good about their excess. She'd worn a burgundy gown that Hajoon's assistant had picked out, something that hugged her curves and made her dark skin glow like polished mahogany under the ballroom lights. You look devastating, Hajoon had said when he'd picked her up, and the way he'd looked at her had made something low in her belly tighten with awareness. Thank you, she'd managed, hyper-aware of his hand at the small of her back as they'd entered the venue. They'd been standing by the bar, discussing a Rothko piece up for auction, when Ray had appeared. Ray, with Sierra heavy and glowing at 7 months pregnant, her hand possessively on her swollen belly. Ray, whose face had drained of color when he'd seen Meadow, seen her transformation, seen her standing close to the one man he feared above all others. "Uncle," Ray had said, his voice strained. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I go where I please, Ray," Hajoon had replied coolly, not bothering to acknowledge Sierra. "You know this. And you brought her." Ray's eyes had raked over Meadow with something ugly and possessive. "What is my ex-wife doing with you?" "Working for me," Hajoon said simply. "Ms. Carter is my chief curator. One of the best acquisitions I've made in years. Very talented, very intelligent. You threw away something valuable, nephew. But that's your pattern, isn't it?" The public rebuke had made Ray's jaw clench. "You hired her to spite me." "I hired her because she's exceptional at her job," Hajoon corrected, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Not everything is about you, Ray. In fact, very little is. But if her employment bothers you, perhaps you should examine why seeing your ex-wife thriving makes you so uncomfortable." Sierra had clutched Ray's arm, sensing the tension, reading the power dynamics correctly. "We should go," she'd said nervously. "Baby's tired." "Yes, run along." Hajoon had dismissed them with a wave. "Congratulations on the pregnancy, by the way. I'm sure this child will receive all the conditional love and impossible expectations that make our family so notoriously dysfunctional. Best of luck." Ray had looked like he wanted to say something, do something, but even he wasn't stupid enough to challenge Hajoon publicly. He'd walked away, Sierra waddling beside him, leaving Meadow trembling with adrenaline and vindication. "Are you all right?" Hajoon had asked, his hand finding hers, warm and grounding. "I'm perfect," Meadow had breathed, and she'd meant it. Watching Ray retreat, watching him realize she wasn't broken, wasn't destroyed, wasn't the worthless barren woman he'd discarded, felt better than anything she'd experienced in years. That night, in the car ride back to her apartment in Silver Lake, the luxury area she could now afford thanks to her salary, Hajoon had said, "He'll try to interfere now. Try to sabotage your position, spread rumors, make your life difficult. My nephew is a small man who can't stand seeing women he's discarded do better without him. Are you prepared for that?" "Let him try," Meadow had said, surprised by her own venom. "I'm done being afraid of Ray Song. I'm done shrinking myself to make mediocre men comfortable." Hajoon had smiled, something predatory and pleased. "Good. Because I don't keep people on my payroll who break easily. And Meadow, you're not breakable. You're flexible, which is much more dangerous." The shift in their relationship had been gradual, then sudden. Professional boundaries had blurred during late nights at the gallery, during business trips to art shows in Miami and Chicago, during moments when Hajoon's hand would linger on her shoulder or his eyes would track her across a room with unmistakable hunger. Meadow had tried to resist, tried to remind herself that getting involved with her boss, with her ex-husband's uncle, with a man rumored to have killed people with his bare hands, was monumentally stupid. But Hajoon had been patient, had waited for her to come to him, had made it clear the choice was entirely hers. "I want you," he told her bluntly one night, 9 months into her employment, after too much wine and too many charged glances. "I've wanted you since I saw you at that gallery, broken but not beaten, angry but not bitter. But I won't pursue you if you're not interested. I don't chase, Meadow. I invite. And you're invited into my life, my bed, my world, if you want it. No pressure, no expectations, no games." The honesty had undone her. After years of Ray's manipulation, of guessing at intentions, of walking on eggshells, Hajoon's directness had been intoxicating. "This is insane," she'd whispered. "You're my boss. You're Ray's uncle. People will think I'm using you, that I'm trying to get revenge, that." "People will think what they think," Hajoon had interrupted, stepping closer. "The question is, what do you want?" What Meadow had wanted, what she'd been denying for months, was him. She'd kissed him first, standing on tiptoes in her apartment overlooking the glittering lights of Los Angeles, pressing her mouth to his with 9 months of suppressed desire and 3 years of being told she wasn't enough. Hajoon had kissed her back like she was oxygen, like she was precious, like she was everything Ray had convinced her she wasn't. That first night together had shattered every remaining piece of the woman Ray had tried to create and revealed someone Meadow had forgotten existed. Hajoon had touched her like her body was art, had worshipped her curves with hands that could break bones but chose gentleness, had made her feel desired in ways that had nothing to do with fertility or usefulness or meeting someone else's expectations. "You're extraordinary," he'd breathed against her throat, her collarbone, the curve of her hip. "Perfect exactly as you are." And Meadow had cried, overwhelmed by the simple acceptance, by being seen as complete rather than defective. Their relationship had been kept carefully private for practical reasons. Hajoon had enemies, business rivals who would use any perceived weakness against him, and Meadow had no desire to become tabloid fodder or a target. But within the confines of his penthouse in downtown LA, in the hidden corners of his world, they'd built something that felt startlingly real. "Tell me about your family," Meadow had asked one night, 2 months into their relationship, curled against his chest in sheets that cost more than her first car. "Tell me how you became this person, this man everyone fears." Hajoon had been quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her shoulder. "My family back in Seoul was old money built on blood," he'd finally said. "My father ran protection rackets, smuggling operations, legitimate businesses that laundered dirty money. He wanted me to take over, to become the next generation of violence and power. I did for a while. Learned the business, got my hands dirty, became exactly what he wanted." "What changed?" Meadow had asked softly. "I fell in love," Hajoon said simply. "With a woman who saw who I was and loved me anyway. Who believed I could be more than my father's weapon. Her name was Meadow, and she was an artist, delicate and fierce and completely inappropriate for someone like me. We were together for 3 years. I was planning to leave the family business, to build something legitimate with her." The past tense had made Meadow's stomach clench with dread. "What happened to her?" "My father's enemies killed her." Hajoon's voice had gone flat, emotionless in the way of someone protecting themselves from unbearable pain. "Car bomb meant for me. She was 28 years old and died because I hadn't been careful enough, hadn't protected her well enough. I was 31 and I became a monster after that." "Hajoon," Meadow had started, but he'd continued, needing to finish. "I destroyed everyone involved in her death. Not just the men who planted the bomb, but their families, their associates, their financial empires. I spent 2 years turning Seoul's underworld into a graveyard, and when I was done, even my father was afraid of me. So I left. Came to America, built a legitimate empire on top of the skills I'd learned in illegitimate ones. But the reputation followed, and honestly, I've never tried to shake it. Fear is useful in business." "Do you still love her?" Meadow had asked, needing to know. "I'll always love who she was," Hajoon had answered honestly, tilting Meadow's face up to meet his eyes. "But I'm not stuck in the past, Meadow. Meadow wanted me to be happy, to be more than vengeance and violence. Being with you, it feels like honoring what she wanted for me. Like maybe I can be the man she believed I could become." The vulnerability in his admission had made Meadow fall harder, faster, deeper than wisdom allowed. Here was a man who'd loved and lost and survived, who understood that broken things could be reformed into something stronger, who saw her scars and didn't flinch because he had matching ones. "Before we go further, besties, I need you to engage with me right now. Drop a comment telling me if you think Hajoon is genuine or if he's playing Meadow. Hit that like button because what's about to happen will make you question everything you think you know about love and loyalty." The confrontation coming between Ray and Hajoon, the secret that gets revealed, you absolutely cannot miss this. Subscribe if you haven't already because this channel is all about stories where women rise from the ashes and burn everything that tried to destroy them. 1 year into their relationship, Meadow had moved into Hajoon's penthouse officially. Not because he'd pressured her, but because being apart felt like voluntarily amputating a limb. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building Hajoon owned in downtown LA, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering 360-degree views of the city, a private rooftop garden, and security that would make the Secret Service jealous. "This is excessive," Meadow had said, standing in the master bedroom that was larger than her entire Silver Lake apartment. "This is safe," Hajoon had corrected, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "And safety, for someone like you in my life, is non-negotiable. I won't lose someone I love to my enemies again. I can't. Someone I love. He'd said it casually, like it wasn't the first time he'd used those words, like it didn't fundamentally reshape Meadow's understanding of her own worth. You love me? She'd whispered, turning in his arms. Of course I love you, Hajoon had said, as if it were obvious. I'm not a man who does casual, Meadow. I don't bring women into my home, into my life, into my heart unless I'm certain. And I'm certain about you. Meadow had kissed him then, pouring every ounce of gratitude and terror and desperate hope into the press of her lips against his. Because she loved him too, this dangerous man who treated her like she was made of starlight, who'd given her back her sense of self, who made her believe she could be more than Ray's leftover shame. Work had continued to flourish. Meadow had curated a show featuring emerging Black artists that had been covered by the New York Times and Art Forum, cementing her reputation as more than just Hajoon's employee or lover. She'd negotiated acquisitions worth millions, had built relationships with collectors across the country, had proven to herself and everyone watching that she was exceptional, independent of any man. And through it all, Hajoon had been her partner, celebrating her victories without trying to claim credit, supporting her ambitions without trying to control them, loving her without trying to own her. It had felt too good, too perfect, too much like the happiness she'd stopped believing she deserved. And then, 14 months into their relationship, Ray had shown up at the gallery on a Tuesday afternoon, alone, desperate, and furious. I need to see my uncle, he demanded, brushing past the receptionist who tried to stop him. Now. Meadow had been in her office, reviewing proposals for an upcoming show, when Ray had burst through the door without knocking. Where is he? Ray had snarled, and Meadow had seen immediately that something was very wrong. He looked haggard, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a manic edge to his movements. Hajoon's in Seoul on business, Meadow had said calmly, standing to put her desk between them. He'll be back next week. If you need to speak with him, you can schedule an appointment through his assistant. I need money, Ray had said bluntly. I need $5 million, and I need it now. Tell him I'll pay it back. Tell him it's an emergency. Tell him whatever you need to tell him, but I need that money. $5 million. Meadow had repeated incredibly. Ray, what's going on? None of your business, he'd snapped, then reconsidered when he saw her expression. My business is failing, all right? The real estate development company I started, it's hemorrhaging money. I made some bad investments, trusted the wrong partners, and now I'm facing bankruptcy unless I can cover the losses. Meadow had felt zero sympathy, only cold curiosity. What about Sierra? Her family has money, don't they? Sierra left me, Ray had said, the words bitter as poison. Took our son and went back to her parents 6 months ago. Said she didn't sign up to be married to a failure. Said she thought I was successful, powerful, someone worth sacrificing family for. Turns out your sister is even more shallow than I thought. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Sierra, who'd stolen Ray because he represented success and status, had abandoned him the moment that facade cracked. Karma, Meadow thought, really was a patient architect. I can't help you, Meadow had said firmly. I don't have access to Hajoon's personal finances, and even if I did, why would he give you $5 million? You've done nothing but disrespect him and his choices. His choices, Ray had laughed, sharp and ugly. You mean you? God, Meadow, do you really think he loves you? Do you really think a man like my uncle, with his resources and power, wants you for anything other than revenge against me? You're a game piece. A way to humiliate me. The second he gets bored, you'll be discarded just like I discarded you. The words had landed exactly where Ray intended, hitting every insecurity Meadow still carried. Get out, she'd said, her voice shaking. Get out of this gallery, out of this building, and don't come back. You know I'm right, Ray had pressed, sensing weakness. You're not special, Meadow. You're just convenient. A way for him to prove he can take anything of mine, even my broken leftovers. When he's done humiliating me, you'll be alone again, and you'll realize you wasted the best years of your life on another man who doesn't actually value you. The best years of my life started the day I divorced you, Meadow had said, her voice finding strength. Every single day with Hajoon has been better than the best day of our marriage. He sees me, values me, celebrates me in ways you never could because you're fundamentally incapable of loving anyone beyond yourself. So no, Ray, you're not right. You're bitter and broke and desperate, and you're trying to destroy my happiness because you can't stand watching me thrive while you collapse. Now get out before I call security. Ray had stared at her, something like respect flickering across his features before anger crushed it. You'll regret this, he'd said. When you're alone again, when he moves on to the next woman, you'll remember that I warned you. He'd left, and Meadow had locked the door behind him, pressing her forehead against the cool wood as Ray's poison worked its way through her bloodstream. Did Hajoon love her, or was she really just revenge? Was their entire relationship built on a foundation of spite toward Ray? Had she traded one form of being used for another, prettier version? Hajoon had returned from Seoul 3 days later, walking into the penthouse at midnight to find Meadow sitting in the dark living room, staring out at the city lights with Ray's words playing on an endless loop in her mind. Meadow? His voice had been concerned, immediately sensing something wrong. What happened? Are you hurt? Am I revenge? She'd asked without turning around, her voice hollow. Is that what this is? Your way of humiliating Ray by taking something he threw away and making it valuable. The silence that followed had been deafening. Hajoon had set down his briefcase, removed his jacket with deliberate slowness, and crossed the room to stand in front of her, blocking her view of the city. Look at me, he'd said quietly, and when Meadow had finally raised her eyes, she'd seen something fierce and wounded in his expression. Ray came to see you. It wasn't a question. He told you I'm using you to hurt him. That you're a game piece in some revenge plot. That I don't actually love you. Are you? Meadow had asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Because I need to know, Hajoon. I need to know if I'm making the same mistake twice, if I'm just a weapon you're wielding against your nephew, if everything we've built is a lie designed to destroy him. Hajoon had dropped to his knees in front of her, taking her hands in his, and the vulnerability of the position from a man who never knelt had stolen Meadow's breath. I'm going to tell you the truth, he'd said, his voice rough. And it's not going to be comfortable, but you deserve honesty. When I first approached you at that gallery, yes, part of me was curious about the woman Ray had destroyed. Part of me wanted to understand what kind of person could survive my nephew's particular brand of cruelty. And yes, there was satisfaction in knowing that hiring you would infuriate him. Meadow's heart had cracked, but Hajoon had continued, his grip tightening on her hands. But Meadow, that curiosity lasted approximately 10 minutes into our first conversation. The satisfaction lasted maybe a week. Everything after that, everything we've built, every moment I've spent falling in love with you, that has nothing to do with Ray. You want to know why I love you? Because you're brilliant and kind and fierce. Because you laugh at my dark humor and call me out when I'm being controlling. Because you survived being broken and chose to rebuild yourself into something stronger instead of something bitter. Because when you talk about art, your whole face lights up like you're witnessing miracles. Because you make me want to be the man Minacio believed I could become. Tears had been streaming down Meadow's face, her defenses crumbling. How do I know that's true? How do I know I'm not just convincing myself because I want it to be true? You don't, Hajoon had said simply. That's the terrifying part of love, Meadow. It requires trust, faith in something you can't prove. But I can tell you this, if I wanted to hurt Ray, there are 1,000 more effective ways than loving you. I could destroy his business, ruin his reputation, have him killed if I wanted. Hurting him doesn't require you at all. But loving you? That requires showing up every day. That requires vulnerability I haven't allowed myself since Minacio died. That requires risk I swore I'd never take again. If this were about Ray, I would have chosen something easier, something that didn't require me to put my heart on the line. The logic had been sound, but more than that, the raw emotion in Hajoon's voice had been undeniable. This was a man who'd built empires on control, who never showed weakness, kneeling in front of her with tears in his own eyes. I love you, he'd said, his voice breaking. I love you so much it terrifies me because I know what it's like to lose someone I love. I know what it does to a person, how it transforms you into something monstrous. And I'm doing it anyway, loving you anyway, because you're worth the risk. But if you can't trust that, if Marcus has poisoned this for us, I'll understand. I won't chase you, Meadow. But I will mourn you for the rest of my life. Meadow had pulled him up, crashed her mouth against his, kissed him with desperation and relief and bone-deep certainty. I love you, she'd breathed between kisses. I love you, and I'm sorry I doubted. I'm sorry I let him in my head. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for protecting yourself, Hajoon had murmured against her lips, her throat, her collarbone. Don't apologize for needing reassurance. I'll give you reassurance every day for the rest of our lives if that's what you need. They'd made love that night with an urgency born of almost loss, of understanding how fragile happiness could be, of choosing each other despite fear. And afterward, tangled in expensive sheets with dawn breaking over Los Angeles, Hajoon had said, "Marry me." Meadow's heart had stopped. What? Marry me, he'd repeated, propping himself up on one elbow to look at her properly. Not because of Ray, not to make some point, but because I want to wake up next to you legally for the rest of my life. Because I want you to have my name, my protection, my everything. Because I'm 43 years old and I've wasted enough time pretending I don't want forever with someone. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard, Meadow had laughed through tears. I don't do romance, Hajoon had said seriously. I do truth. And the truth is I want to marry you. I want children with you if that's possible, and if it's not, I want to adopt or foster or just have it be us. I want to build a life that's ours, not defined by my past or your past, but by what we choose to create together. So, Meadow Carter, will you marry me? Yes, she'd whispered, the word catching in her throat. Yes, I'll marry you. They'd married 3 weeks later in a private ceremony in Malibu, just them and 2 witnesses pulled from Hajoon's security team. No family, no fanfare, just vows exchanged on a cliff overlooking the Pacific at sunset. Meadow had worn a simple white dress that hugged her curves, and Hajoon had looked at her like she'd hung the stars. I vow to protect you, he'd said, his voice carrying over the sound of waves. To value you, to see you, to love you exactly as you are for as long as I live. You are my second chance at happiness, Meadow, and I won't waste it. I vow to trust you, Meadow had responded, her own voice steady despite emotions threatening to overwhelm her. To build a life with you, to be your partner in everything, to love you even when it's scary. You gave me back myself, Hajoon. I'll spend the rest of my life showing you what a gift that was. The first year of marriage had been blissful in ways Meadow hadn't known existed. Hajoon had been attentive without being controlling, supportive without being patronizing, present in ways Ray never had been. They'd traveled, visited galleries in Paris and London, spent lazy weekends in their Malibu beach house, built a life that felt solid and real and permanent. Meadow had continued to excel at work, her reputation growing independent of her relationship with Hajoon. She'd been featured in Art in America magazine, had given talks at museums, had become someone respected in her own right. And through it all, Hajoon had been her biggest champion, celebrating her success without trying to claim ownership of it. The only shadow had been the persistent absence of pregnancy. Not that they were trying exactly, but they weren't preventing either. And month after month, Meadow's period arrived like clockwork, a reminder of what Ray had called her fundamental failure as a woman. It doesn't matter, Hajoon had said every time he'd seen that look of disappointment cross her face. I married you, not your uterus. If we have children, wonderful. If we don't, we have each other. That's enough. But Meadow had known it wasn't quite enough for her. She'd wanted to give Hajoon what Minnesio never had the chance to, wanted to create life with this man who'd given her back her own. She'd started seeing a fertility specialist discreetly, not telling Hajoon because she didn't want to worry him or make him feel pressured. The specialist, Dr. Reeves in Newport Beach, had run tests, done examinations, and finally delivered news that had shattered Meadow's understanding of her own history. Mrs. O, Dr. Reeves had said gently, there's nothing wrong with your fertility. Your hormone levels are excellent, your ovarian reserve is healthy, your fallopian tubes are clear. You're perfectly capable of conceiving and carrying a pregnancy. Meadow had stared at the doctor, her world tilting. That's impossible. I was married for 4 years before and never got pregnant. My ex-husband, he said I was barren, that my body was defective, that your ex-husband was either lying or misinformed, Dr. Reeves had interrupted carefully. Ms. O, based on these results, if you were having regular, unprotected intercourse for 4 years and never conceived, the problem wasn't you. It was him. The words had detonated in Meadow's chest like a bomb. For years of being called broken. For years of invasive procedures and hormones and shame. For years of Ray's family treating her like defective goods. And it had been him all along. Ray was the one who couldn't have children, not her. But his girlfriend, Meadow, had said faintly, "My sister, she got pregnant. They have a son." Dr. Reeves had shifted uncomfortably. "I can't speak to other people's situations, but I can tell you definitively that you are not infertile. If your ex-husband's partner became pregnant, either his condition was temporary or treatable, or..." She'd trailed off delicately. "Or she got pregnant by someone else," Meadow had finished, the implications crashing over her. Oh my God. She'd left the doctor's office in a daze, driving aimlessly through Orange County as her entire marriage recontextualized itself. Ray had known. He must have known or suspected that he was the problem, not her. And instead of admitting it, instead of facing that blow to his ego, he'd spent 4 years making Meadow believe she was broken. He'd put her through procedures and treatments for a condition she didn't have. He'd let his family torture her over fertility that was never in question. And then he'd claimed Sierra's baby as his own, probably knowing it wasn't, because maintaining the lie was more important than Meadow's sanity or dignity. The cruelty of it, the calculated maliciousness, had stolen Meadow's breath. Meadow had driven straight to the penthouse, bursting through the door with fury and vindication burning in her veins. Hajoon had been in his study, reviewing contracts, and had looked up in alarm when she'd stormed in. "Meadow? What's wrong?" "I'm not broken," she'd said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I'm not barren, I'm not defective, I'm not any of the things Ray said I was. I saw a fertility specialist and I'm completely fine. It was him, Hajoon. Ray couldn't get me pregnant, not the other way around." Hajoon had gone very still, his expression darkening with understanding. That son of a bitch knew. He had to know, Meadow had said, pacing the study like a caged animal. No man tries for 4 years and never questions himself. He knew or suspected, and instead of dealing with it, he made me the problem. He let me believe I was worthless, that my body was broken, that I'd failed at the most basic biological function. And his son, the baby Sierra had, it probably isn't even his. She probably cheated, and he claimed it anyway because admitting he was infertile would have destroyed his ego. Hajoon had stood, crossed to her, gripped her shoulders with barely controlled rage. "I'm going to kill him. Not figuratively, Meadow. I'm actually going to kill him for what he did to you." The flat certainty in his voice should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like validation, like someone finally understanding the magnitude of what had been done to her. "No," Meadow had said, placing her hands over his. "You're not going to kill him because I need you here with me, not in prison. But I want him to know. I want him to know that I know, that his lie is exposed, that every single moment of torture he put me through was based on his own inadequacy. Then we'll make him know," Hajoon had said grimly. "We'll destroy him with the truth." But before they could act on that rage, before they could confront Ray with his deception, Meadow's body had delivered its own revelation. 3 weeks after the doctor's appointment, her period hadn't come. For weeks, and she'd felt a strange tenderness in her breasts, a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep touched. 5 weeks, and she'd bought a pregnancy test with shaking hands, taken it in the private bathroom of her gallery office, and watched 2 pink lines materialize like a miracle. Pregnant. She was pregnant with Hajoon's child, carrying proof of her own fertility in her womb, evidence that Ray's cruelty had been built on lies. The joy had been immense, overwhelming, terrifying. But so had the fear. Because Meadow knew what happened to people Hajoon loved. Min-Seo, killed by enemies who'd used her to hurt him. And now Meadow would be carrying the most vulnerable target imaginable, a child who would be leverage against one of the most dangerous men in 2 countries. She'd sat in her office, test in hand, trying to decide if telling Hajoon was an act of love or an invitation to tragedy. That's where we are now, loves. Right back at the beginning, Meadow holding that positive test in her penthouse, trying to decide if the man she loves deserves to know he's going to be a father, or if protecting him means disappearing with this secret. Drop a comment right now telling me what she should do. And hit that subscribe button because the decision she makes in the next 60 seconds will determine everything. The confrontation with Ray, the danger that comes for them, the ultimate test of their love. You cannot miss what happens next. Meadow decided on honesty. Not because it was safe, but because their entire relationship was built on truth, and starting this new chapter with lies felt like poisoning it from the start. She went home to the penthouse, found Hajoon on the rooftop garden where he went to think, and simply held out the pregnancy test without preamble. Hajoon stared at the test for a full 10 seconds, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at Meadow, and she saw tears tracking down his face. This dangerous man who never cried, who'd built empires on control, completely undone by 2 pink lines. "You're pregnant," he whispered, like saying it too loud might make it disappear. "We're going to have a baby." "I'm terrified," Meadow admitted, moving into his arms. "I'm terrified of what this means, who might come after us, what dangers we're bringing this child into. Your world, Hajoon, it's not safe for something this precious." "I know," he said roughly, holding her like she might evaporate. "God, Meadow, I know. But I also know I'll burn down anyone who tries to hurt you or our child. I'll make this world safe for our family if I have to destroy everyone who poses a threat." The vow should have sounded insane, but coming from Hajoon, it sounded like simple fact. "We need to tell people carefully," Meadow said. "We need security, plans, protection before word gets out that you're vulnerable." "I'm not vulnerable," Hajoon corrected, his hand spreading over her still flat stomach with reverent gentleness. "I'm motivated. There's a difference. Anyone who thinks my love for you and our child makes me weak will learn exactly how wrong they are." They spent the next week putting measures in place. Additional security, background checks on everyone in their orbit, contingency plans for every possible threat. Hajoon moved them to a different property temporarily, a fortress in the Hollywood Hills with security that rivaled government installations. He pulled resources from his contacts in Seoul, building a network of protection around Meadow that felt both suffocating and necessary. And then Ray showed up again, this time not desperate, but dangerous. He had bypassed security by claiming to have information about a threat to Hajoon's life, and by the time they realized it was a lie, he was already in the house, wild-eyed and drunk, waving a gun he clearly didn't know how to use properly. "Where is he?" Ray shouted, stumbling into the living room where Meadow was working on her laptop. "Where's my uncle? I know he's destroying my business. I know he's behind the investigations, the lawsuits, everything falling apart. Where is he?" Meadow froze, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach in protection, though there was nothing visible there yet to protect. "Ray, you need to leave. Security is already on the way, and threatening me will only make things worse for you." "Worse?" Ray laughed, sharp and unhinged. "How could things possibly be worse?" "I've lost everything, Meadow. My business, my reputation, my family. Sierra took my son, except he's not even my son, is he? The paternity test her lawyer demanded proved that. She was sleeping with someone else the whole time, and I was too proud to question it because admitting I might be infertile was unthinkable." So Meadow had been right. The child wasn't Ray's, and he'd known or suspected all along. "You made me believe I was broken," Meadow said quietly, standing slowly. "You spent 4 years torturing me over a condition I never had, making me feel worthless and defective, when you were the one who couldn't have children. How could you do that to someone you claimed to love?" "Because it was easier than admitting the truth," Ray shouted, the gun wavering dangerously. "Easier than facing that I was the failure, that I was the one who wasn't man enough to father children. So yes, I let you take the blame. I let my family destroy you. I put you through procedures and treatments you didn't need because maintaining the lie was more important than your pain." The admission hung in the air, ugly and irrefutable. "And now you're pregnant, aren't you?" Ray continued, his eyes dropping to where Meadow's hand rested on her stomach. "I can see it in how you're standing, how you're protecting yourself. You're pregnant with his child, proving once and for all that I was the problem. Do you have any idea what that does to me? Knowing you're giving him what you could never give me. I could have given you children, Meadow said, her voice steel. If you'd been honest, if you'd sought treatment, if you'd been anything other than a coward hiding behind lies. But you chose your ego over our marriage, your pride over my humanity. That's on you, Ray, not me. Put the gun down, nephew. Hajoon's voice came from the doorway, cold and lethal. He'd entered silently, moving with the predatory grace of someone who'd ended lives before. Put it down and walk away while you still can. Ray swung the gun toward Hajoon, his hand shaking. You took everything from me. My wife, my dignity, my future. You systematically destroyed my life because you could, because you wanted to prove you're better than me. I didn't have to prove anything, Hajoon said, moving slowly into the room, positioning himself between Ray and Meadow. You destroyed yourself, Ray. The business failures, the fraud I exposed, the way everyone in your life leaves you, that's all your own work. I just refuse to cover for you anymore. You turned the family against me, Ray accused. You told them about the embezzlement, the lies, everything. I told them the truth, Hajoon corrected. Something you've never had the courage to do. And now you're in my home, threatening my pregnant wife with a gun you don't know how to use. So I'll give you one chance, Ray. Put it down, walk out, disappear from our lives forever, and I won't kill you. Keep threatening Meadow, and I'll make you disappear so completely your own mother won't find enough of you to bury. The threat was delivered calmly, factually, and Ray must have seen something in Hajoon's eyes that convinced him of sincerity, because the gun lowered slightly. She should have been mine, Ray said, his voice breaking. The baby, the life, the happiness. That was supposed to be mine, and you stole it. She was never yours, Hajoon said simply. You had the privilege of her love, and you threw it away. You tortured her, broke her, and discarded her like trash. I didn't steal Meadow, Ray. I recognized her value after you proved you never could. There's a difference. I loved her, Ray insisted weakly. In my own way, I loved her. No, Meadow said, finding her voice. You loved what I represented. You loved having a wife who made you look progressive and open-minded. You loved the idea of me, but you never loved me. Because love doesn't torture, Ray. Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't make someone believe they're fundamentally broken to protect your own ego. The truth of it seemed to hit Ray like a physical blow. The gun dropped completely, clattering to the floor, and he sagged like a puppet with cut strings. I'm sorry, he whispered, and for the first time, he sounded genuine. I'm so sorry for what I did to you, Meadow. You deserved better than me. You deserved better than any of it. Yes, Meadow agreed quietly. I did. And I found it. Security arrived then, summoned by Hajoon's silent alert, and Ray was escorted out without resistance. The gun was unloaded, they discovered later, more prop than weapon, a desperate man's last attempt at feeling powerful. Hajoon pulled Meadow into his arms the moment Ray was gone, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? Is the baby? We're fine, Meadow assured him, though she was shaking with adrenaline. We're both fine, Hajoon. He didn't hurt us. He could have, Hajoon said roughly. God, Meadow, he could have hurt you, hurt our child, and it would have been my fault for not protecting you well enough. Stop, Meadow pulled back to look at him. This isn't your fault. Marcus made his choices. His pain, his desperation, his violence, that's on him, not you. But the incident had changed something in Hajoon. He became even more protective, more obsessive about security, more determined to eliminate any possible threat to their family. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Ray, Hajoon called Meadow into his study with an expression that made her stomach clench with apprehension. We need to talk about Soul, he said without preamble. My father is dying, and he's demanding to see me before he goes. He knows about you, about the baby, and he wants to meet his grandchild's mother. Meadow sank into the leather chair across from his desk, processing. Your father. The man who ran protection rackets and smuggling operations. The man whose enemies killed Menesio. That father wants to meet me while I'm pregnant with his grandchild. I know how it sounds, Hajoon said heavily. And I told him no initially. But Meadow, he's threatening to come here if I don't go there. And my father in Los Angeles, on my territory, near you, that's more dangerous than me going to Seoul alone. Alone. Meadow repeated, her voice sharp. You think I'm letting you fly to Korea to face your crime lord father without me? Absolutely not, Hajoon. We're partners, remember? We face threats together. You're 3 months pregnant, Hajoon argued. Taking you into my father's world, into that level of danger, it's not negotiable. Then nothing is negotiable, Meadow stood, her own stubbornness rising to meet his. Because I'm not sitting in Los Angeles wondering if you're coming back, wondering if your father is going to kill you or trap you or use you. If you go to Seoul, I go to Seoul. That's final. They argued for an hour, both of them immovable, until finally Hajoon conceded with the stipulation that Meadow would have her own security team, would stay in a separate secure location, and would leave immediately if anything felt dangerous. They flew to Seoul first class on Hajoon's private jet, the 12-hour flight giving Meadow time to research the man she was about to meet. Oh Tae-yong, 68 years old, patriarch of one of Seoul's most powerful crime families, a man who'd built an empire on blood and fear and strategic violence. The articles about him were scarce and carefully worded, but the implications were clear. This was not a man to underestimate. Seoul was overwhelming in its intensity, the city sprawling and modern and ancient all at once, neon and tradition colliding in ways that made Meadow's head spin. They were driven to a compound in Gangnam, the wealthy district that put even Boston, Massachusetts to shame, where Hajoon's family maintained their legitimate facade. Remember, Hajoon said as they'd approached the gates, his hand tight on hers, my father will try to find your weaknesses. He'll probe, manipulate, test you. Don't give him anything real. Don't let him see how much you mean to me, because he'll use it against us both. But when they entered the traditional Korean house, all sliding doors and careful aesthetics, Oh Tae-yong took one look at Meadow and smiled with genuine warmth that completely contradicted everything she'd expected. So you're the woman who tamed my son, he said in accented but perfect English, gesturing for them to sit. The Black American art curator who made Hajoon believe in love again. I've heard much about you, Meadow Carter. All terrible things, I'm sure, Meadow said carefully, sitting on the floor cushion with as much grace as her pregnant body allowed. On the contrary, Tae-yong poured tea with steady hands despite the sickness clearly ravaging his body. I've heard you're brilliant, fierce, loyal, and strong enough to survive his nephew's particular brand of cruelty. Any woman who can endure a Song family marriage and emerge stronger has my respect. The unexpected praise threw Meadow off balance. Thank you, Mr. O. Call me a Bioji, he said. You're carrying my grandchild. That makes us family, and family doesn't stand on ceremony. Now, my son tells me you're 3 months along. How are you feeling? Is the pregnancy progressing well? The conversation was surprisingly pleasant, Tae-yong asking about Meadow's work, her background, her experience with Korean culture. He shared stories about Hajoon's childhood, humanizing the dangerous man Meadow had married in ways she'd never heard. He was sensitive as a boy, Tae-yong had said, smiling at Hajoon's discomfort. Too sensitive for this life. He cried when he saw injured animals, gave his allowance to homeless people, believed in justice and fairness. I tried to beat it out of him, make him harder, colder. I failed, thank God. You didn't fail, Hajoon had said quietly. You broke something in me that Minesio had to fix. And when she died because of your world, because of the enemies you made, that broke me again in ways I'm still repairing. The tension in the room had shifted, years of complicated history surfacing. I know, Tae-yong had said, his voice heavy with regret. I know what my life cost her. That's why I called you here, Hajoon. Not to manipulate, not to pull you back into the business. I called you here to apologize and to warn you. Warn me about what? Hajoon had gone very still, predatory instinct activating. There are people in my organization who see your happiness as weakness, Tae-yong had said bluntly. People who think your American wife and coming child make you vulnerable. They're planning something, Hajoon. I don't know all the details, but I've heard whispers. An attack on your family to draw you out, to force you back to Seoul, to make you choose between your new life and your blood. Meadow's hand had moved instinctively to her stomach, fear lancing through her. Who's planning this? My second in command, Baek Jinho, Tae-yong had said. He wants to take over when I die, but he knows you have the legitimate claim if you wanted it. He sees eliminating your family as eliminating competition. I've tried to stop him, but I'm dying and my authority is weakening. That's why I needed you here, to warn you face to face, to give you information you can use to protect yourself. Hajoon had stood abruptly, pacing like a caged tiger. You brought us into danger to warn us about danger. That's insane, father. I brought you here because you needed to understand the threat is real and organized, Taeyong had countered. In Los Angeles, you would have assumed I was exaggerating or manipulating. Here, you can see my organization, see the people who want you dead, prepare properly. And Meadow, she needed to understand what being an O means. What threats your child will inherit. The weight of that statement had settled over Meadow like a shroud. Her child, this baby she was growing, would be born into a world of wealth and danger, protection and threats, love and violence. What do? She'd asked, looking between the two men. We eliminate the threat, Hajoon had said flatly. Before it can touch my family. No, Taeyong had shaken his head. You eliminate Beck, and 5 more like him rise up. The only way to truly protect your family is to take over the organization yourself, reform it from the inside, turn it legitimate. It's what I should have done years ago. It's what you can do now. I won't, Hajoon had said immediately. I left this world for a reason. I built something clean, something that doesn't require blood. I'm not dragging Meadow and our child into. They're already in it, Taeyong had interrupted. The moment you fell in love with her, the moment you got her pregnant, they became part of this whether you want them to be or not. You can ignore that reality, stay in Los Angeles pretending you're separate from your blood, and watch them get hurt. Or you can accept your birthright, take control, and make this organization something that protects them instead of threatens them. The argument had continued for hours, Hajoon refusing to even consider taking over his father's empire, Taeyong insisting it was the only way to ensure long-term safety. And Meadow had sat there, processing the impossible choice being laid at their feet. Finally, she'd spoken. Can I talk to Hajoon alone? Both men had looked at her in surprise, but Taeyong had nodded and left the room, closing the sliding door behind him with careful precision. You're not seriously considering this, Hajoon had said immediately. Taking over my father's organization, becoming what I spent 15 years trying to escape. Meadow, it would destroy everything we've built. Or it would protect everything we're building, Meadow had countered quietly. Hajoon, I don't want you to become a criminal. I don't want our child growing up around violence and corruption. But your father is right about one thing. We're already targets. Pretending we're not won't make us safer. So, what are you suggesting? Hajoon had asked, tension in every line of his body. I'm suggesting we meet this Baek Jin-ho, Meadow had said, an idea forming even as she spoke. We find out exactly what he's planning, how organized the threat is. And then we make a decision based on real information instead of fear. Maybe there's a middle path, a way to neutralize the threat without you having to take over completely. But we need to know what we're dealing with first. Hajoon had stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You want to meet the man planning to kill you? While you're pregnant. I want to look him in the eye, Meadow had said firmly, and let him see I'm not afraid. Bullies and criminals, they rely on fear, on victims staying hidden and vulnerable. But I'm not a victim anymore, Hajoon. Ray tried to break me and failed. I'm not letting some Korean mobster succeed where my ex-husband couldn't. The fierce determination in her voice had made Hajoon's expression shift from alarm to something like awe. You're insane, he'd said. Absolutely certifiably insane. I'm an O, Meadow had corrected with a slight smile. Apparently that comes with a certain level of necessary insanity. So, are we doing this together or am I meeting this threat alone? Together, Hajoon had said immediately, pulling her into his arms. Always together, even when you're making catastrophically dangerous decisions. The meeting with Baek Jin-ho had been arranged for the following evening at a restaurant in Itaewon, neutral territory where both sides could bring security without starting a war. Meadow had dressed carefully, a black dress that accommodated her small baby bump, hair pulled back severely, makeup minimal. She'd wanted to look strong, composed, unthreatened. Beck had been younger than she'd expected, maybe 45, handsome in a cold way, with eyes that assessed her like she was a problem to solve rather than a person. "So you're the American," he'd said in English, his accent thick. "The pregnant wife who makes O Hajoon weak. I expected someone more impressive. And I expected someone more intelligent than to threaten a pregnant woman and think it makes him powerful," Meadow had replied smoothly, not flinching under his gaze. "But I suppose we're both disappointed." Beck's eyes had narrowed. "You have courage, I'll give you that. Stupid courage, but courage. Coming here, meeting me, knowing I want you dead. That takes either bravery or suicidal arrogance." "It takes understanding," Meadow had said, leaning forward slightly. "I understand that you see me as leverage. A way to control Hajoon, to force him to either take over the organization or leave it vulnerable by staying away. I understand that in your world, family is weakness, love is exploitable, and women are tools." "I get it, Beck. I really do." "Then you understand why you're already dead," Beck had said flatly. "Unless your husband does what's necessary." "What I understand," Meadow had continued as if he hadn't spoken, "is that you're afraid. You're afraid that if Hajoon takes over, he'll reform the organization, cut out the corruption, eliminate people like you who profit from the criminal elements. You're afraid he'll make this empire legitimate and leave you powerless. So you're trying to force a choice. Make him prioritize family over power or power over family. Either way, you think you win." The accuracy of her assessment had made Beck's expression flicker with surprise. "Smart woman. Wasted on a man too soft to use your intelligence properly." "Hajoon isn't soft," Meadow had said quietly, dangerously. "He's controlled. There's a difference. Soft men threaten pregnant women. Controlled men wait until the perfect moment to destroy their enemies so completely they can't retaliate. So let me make you an offer, Beck. Walk away from whatever plan you're building. Leave my family alone. And in exchange, when Hajoon takes over his father's empire, we'll let you retire with your wealth and your life intact." Beck had laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "You think you can negotiate with me? You think offering me retirement is enough to stop what's already in motion? Woman, you're more naive than I thought. What's already in motion?" Hajoon had spoken for the first time, his voice deadly calm. "What exactly have you set up, Beck? Wouldn't you like to know?" Beck had leaned back, supremely confident. "Let's just say your pretty wife and your unborn child have limited time to enjoy breathing. Unless you do what's right, take over your father's organization, and let me continue running operations my way. Then maybe, the threats disappear." Or, Hajoon had said, his hand moving so fast Meadow barely saw it, pressing a recording device onto the table between them, "maybe you just confess to conspiracy and threatening to murder on tape, in front of witnesses, giving me everything I need to have you eliminated legally within your own organization's rules." Beck's face had gone white, then red with fury. "You recorded this? You dare." "I dare many things when my family is threatened," Hajoon had interrupted, his voice like ice. "Including following every arcane rule in my father's organization about challenges to authority. You threaten my wife and child. According to the old codes, that gives me the right to challenge you directly. So here's my offer, Beck. You leave Seoul tonight, disappear into whatever hole you crawl out of, and I don't play this recording for the council. Or you stay, and I use every resource I have to destroy you so completely your own mother won't remember your name." The restaurant had gone silent, other diners and staff suddenly very interested in looking anywhere but at their table. Meadow had felt the weight of eyes on them, the whole room holding its breath. "This isn't over," Beck had stood abruptly, chair scraping. "You think one recording, one threat, is enough to stop me? I have resources, alliances, people who..." Hajoon had corrected softly. Past tense. "Because while we've been having this pleasant dinner, my people have been arresting your key allies on charges ranging from embezzlement to human trafficking. Your bank accounts have been frozen by authorities in 3 countries. Your safe houses have been raided. And your second in command, the one you trusted with your contingency plans, has been working for me for 6 months. You have nothing left, Beck. You're already destroyed." This conversation was just courtesy, letting you know why. The devastation on Beck's face had been absolute. He looked around wildly, seeing his own security team standing down, seeing people he'd thought were allies turning away. "You planned this," Beck had whispered. "This whole thing, bringing your wife, the meeting, you planned all of it." "I plan everything," Hajoon had said simply. "It's how I've stayed alive this long." "Now, are you leaving Seoul voluntarily, or do I need to make your departure permanent?" Beck had stumbled out of the restaurant like a broken man, his empire crumbling around him in real time. And Meadow had sat there, processing what she'd just witnessed. Her husband, the man who made her breakfast and rubbed her feet when they were sore, had just dismantled a criminal organization with surgical precision. "You used me as bait," she'd said quietly once they were alone. "You knew Beck would underestimate me, would focus on me as the weakness, while you systematically destroyed his support structure." "Yes," Hajoon had admitted, no apology in his voice. "I used you as a distraction, but Meadow, you were never in real danger. Every person in this restaurant works for me. The security outside, the staff, even the couple 3 tables over. This entire scenario was controlled from the moment we walked in." You could have told me," Meadow had said, not sure if she was angry or impressed. "I would have played my part better if I'd known it was performance." "No," Hajoon had taken her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You needed to be genuinely afraid, genuinely fierce, genuinely yourself. Beck would have seen through a performance. But your real courage, your authentic defiance, that sold the whole thing. That made him focus on you while I destroyed him." The logic was sound, but Meadow still felt manipulated, used in ways that echoed uncomfortably with Ray's treatment, even though the intention was completely different. "I need you to promise me something," she'd said, standing. "I need you to promise that if we're doing this, if you're taking over your father's organization, if we're entering this world fully, you'll never use me without telling me again. I'll be bait, I'll be distraction, I'll be whatever you need, but I need to know what I'm walking into. I need agency, Hajoon. I've had enough of men making decisions about my life without my input." The comparison to Ray had landed like Meadow intended, and Hajoon had flinched. "You're right. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just controlling the situation without your consent. It won't happen again." "Good," Meadow had softened slightly. "Because I meant what I said in there. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm your partner, your wife, your equal. Treat me like it." They'd left Seoul 2 days later, after Hajoon had formally taken control of his father's organization in front of a council of stone-faced men who'd looked at Meadow like she was both curiosity and threat. Hajoon had made his intentions clear. The criminal elements would be phased out, the organization would go legitimate within 5 years, and anyone who couldn't adapt would be encouraged to retire. They'd return to Los Angeles with new security, new awareness, and a pregnancy that was progressing beautifully. Meadow had continued working, curating a major show featuring Korean and African American artists in dialogue, a project that felt personal and powerful. At 5 months pregnant, her belly was undeniably round, and she'd never felt more beautiful. Hajoon had been obsessed with the pregnancy, talking to her stomach every night, reading books on fatherhood, attending every doctor's appointment with the dedication of a man who'd thought this future was lost to him. "It's a girl," Dr. Reeves had announced at the 20-week ultrasound, and Meadow had watched Hajoon's face crumble with joy. "A daughter. We're having a daughter. Are you disappointed?" Meadow had asked later, knowing some men in Korean culture preferred sons. "Disappointed?" Hajoon had looked at her like she was insane. "Meadow, I'm terrified. Raising a daughter in my world, protecting her from everything I know exists, teaching her to be strong and safe and happy. It's the most important thing I'll ever do." But disappointed? Never. They'd started preparing the nursery, a room in the penthouse decorated in soft creams and golds, with art from both their cultures, books in English and Korean, a space that reflected the mixed heritage their daughter would inherit. Everything had been perfect, peaceful, healing. And then, at 6 months pregnant, Meadow's phone had rung with an unknown number. "Hello," she'd answered, expecting spam. "Meadow Carter." The voice had been female, young, vaguely familiar. Or should I say Meadow now? "I hear you remarried." "Upgraded significantly." Meadow's blood had run cold because she knew that voice, had heard it 1,000 times in her childhood. Sierra. In the flesh, her half-sister had said, false cheer-coating words. Well, not actually in the flesh since I'm calling from Orange County. But close enough. We need to talk, sister. We have nothing to talk about, Meadow had said, her hand moving protectively to her belly. You made your choices, I made mine. We're done. Oh, but we're not, Sierra had said, and Meadow could hear the smile in her voice. Because I have information you need. Information about your precious husband, about his past, about things he hasn't told you. Things that might make you reconsider this whole happy family fantasy you're building. The manipulation was obvious, transparent even, but Meadow felt curiosity war with caution. Whatever you think you know, I'm not interested. Hajoon and I don't have secrets. Really? Sierra had laughed. So he told you about the woman in Seoul? The one who looks remarkably like you, who he was seen with during your visit. The one his organization is protecting in a safe house in Gangnam? No? Funny, I thought you two were all about honesty. The words had hit like physical blows, not because Meadow believed them necessarily, but because Sierra had specific details. Gangnam, the visit to Seoul, the protected safe house. Either she was guessing incredibly well, or she had actual information. Where did you hear this? Meadow had asked carefully. From Ray, Sierra had said simply. He's been investigating your husband, trying to find leverage to get back at you both. And he found something, Meadow. Something big. So I'm offering you a deal. Meet me, let me show you what we've found, and in exchange, I'll tell you why I really called. Because, spoiler alert, I need your help with something only you can provide. Why would I help you? Meadow had asked. After what you did, after stealing Ray, after destroying my marriage. Because I'm dying, Sierra had interrupted, her voice losing its playful edge. Because I have stage 4 cervical cancer that I ignored too long because I was too busy playing happy family with a man who never loved me. Because I have maybe 6 months left, and I want to make things right before I go. And because Meadow, no matter what I've done, I'm still your sister. Doesn't that count for something? The words had stolen Meadow's breath. Sierra, dying. Sierra, her baby sister who she'd raised, who'd betrayed her, who she'd tried so hard to hate, but never quite managed to stop loving. I need to talk to Hajoon, Meadow had said. I need to. Don't, Sierra had urged. Don't tell him yet. Meet me first, see what I have, decide for yourself what it means. You're strong enough to handle the truth now, Meadow. You don't need his permission to hear it. Meet me tomorrow at the cafe in Laguna Beach, the one Mom used to take us to. 2 p.m. Come alone. The line had gone dead, leaving Meadow holding her phone, her heart racing, her mind spinning with possibilities. Sierra was dying. Sierra had information about Hajoon. Sierra wanted to meet alone. Every rational part of Meadow's brain screamed trap, manipulation, danger. But the part of her that remembered a 7-year-old Sierra crying at their mother's funeral, that remembered teaching her to ride a bike and helping with homework and promising to always protect her, that part whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was real. She'd sat with the decision for hours, pacing the penthouse, touching her belly for comfort, weighing options. Trust Hajoon completely and tell him about the call? Risk whatever Sierra claimed to know being true and having to face it without preparation? Or meet Sierra, hear her out, gather information before deciding what to do with it? By midnight, Meadow had made her choice. She would meet Sierra, but not alone. She would bring her own security, would stay in public, would be smart about it. She would hear what her sister had to say, evaluate the supposed evidence about Hajoon, and then make decisions based on reality rather than fear or blind trust. Because the truth was, as much as she loved Hajoon, as much as she believed in their marriage, Ray had taught her that even people you love can hide devastating truths. And she'd rather know and deal with it than be blindsided again. She'd texted Hajoon, who was in a late meeting, saying she wasn't feeling well and was going to bed early. Not technically a lie, since her stomach was churning with anxiety. Then she'd laid in their bed, hand on her belly where their daughter was shifting and kicking, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest decision. Tomorrow would tell. Tomorrow, she'd face whatever Sierra had found, Whatever truth or lie was waiting in Laguna Beach, and she'd decide if the life she'd built with Hajoon was as real as it felt or if she was once again playing a role in someone else's game. The cafe in Laguna Beach was exactly as Meadow remembered it: white wicker furniture and ocean views, the smell of salt air mixing with fresh coffee, tourists and locals mingling in the kind of casual wealth that defined Orange County. She'd arrived 15 minutes early, her security team positioned discreetly at nearby tables, and waited with her hand resting on her pregnant belly, drawing strength from the life growing inside her. Sierra had arrived exactly at 2 p.m., and Meadow had barely recognized her. The vibrant, smug woman who'd stolen Ray was gone, replaced by someone gaunt and gray, her honey-toned skin sallow, her eyes too large in her thin face. Cancer was devouring her from the inside, and it showed in every fragile movement. "You look good," Sierra had said, sliding into the chair across from Meadow. "Pregnancy agrees with you. Makes you glow, or whatever people say. I wouldn't know. The baby Ray and I had, he's not mine." The admission had been delivered flatly, without emotion, and Meadow had stared in confusion. "What do you mean he's not yours?" "I saw you pregnant, saw you with the baby, surrogate," Sierra had interrupted. "Ray couldn't get me pregnant either, turns out. We tried for a year after you left, nothing happened. So we hired a surrogate, used donor eggs and donor sperm, and I pretended to be pregnant. Padding, fake ultrasounds, the whole performance. Because admitting Ray was infertile would have destroyed his ego, and I was still stupid enough to protect him back then." The layers of deception had made Meadow's head spin. Ray had created an elaborate fiction rather than face the truth of his own body. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I owe you the truth," Sierra had said, her voice cracking. "About everything. About why I slept with your husband, why I helped destroy your marriage, all of it. And because I need you to hear it before I show you what I found about Hajoon, so you understand I'm not trying to hurt you anymore. I'm trying to save you from making my mistakes." Meadow had gestured for her to continue, her heart hammering. "Ray approached me," Sierra had said, and the words had landed like bombs. "6 months into your marriage. He told me he needed help, that you were getting suspicious about his infertility, that he needed a distraction. He seduced me, made me fall in love with him, convinced me that you were the problem in the marriage. Cold, unloving, obsessed with having babies. He painted you as a monster and himself as a victim, and I believed him because I was 22 and stupid and jealous of your life. The betrayal had been planned, orchestrated, weaponized against her." "You're saying Ray used you to hurt me?" "I'm saying Ray used both of us," Sierra had corrected, tears streaming down her thin face. "He needed a mistress to blame the marriage failure on. He needed someone to get pregnant, to prove his virility. And he needed to destroy you so completely that you'd never question the narrative he was building. I was a tool, Meadow. Just like you were. The difference is you were smart enough to get out. I stayed and let him destroy me too." Meadow had felt something shift in her chest, old anger making room for something like pity. "Sierra, I'm sorry for what he did to you." "I am. But that doesn't excuse." "I know," Sierra had interrupted. "Nothing excuses what I did. Sleeping with your husband, flaunting it, helping him gaslight you about your own worth. I was cruel because I was hurt, and that's not a reason, just an explanation. I don't expect forgiveness, Meadow. I just need you to know the truth before you look at what I brought." She'd pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table with shaking hands. "Ray hired investigators to dig into Hajoon's past, looking for leverage. This is what they found. And Meadow, I think you need to see it, not because I want to hurt you, but because you deserve to make choices with full information. Ray controlled you with lies. Don't let anyone do that again, even someone you love." Meadow had opened the envelope with dread pooling in her stomach, pulling out photographs, documents, investigation reports. The first photo had been of Hajoon in Seoul, standing outside a building with a woman. A black woman with features eerily similar to Meadow's. Same bone structure, same build, even similar hair. "Her name is Harper Collins," Sierra had said quietly. "She's an American, lived in Seoul for 3 years. She was Hajoon's girlfriend before Minaseo, the one nobody talks about because the relationship ended badly. According to the investigators, Hajoon's been supporting her financially for years, keeping her in Seoul in a protected apartment. Meadow's hands had trembled as she'd flipped through more photos. Hajoon with Harper at restaurants, walking through parks, standing close in ways that suggested intimacy. The dates on the photos ranged from 8 years ago to as recent as their trip to Seoul 3 months earlier. "This doesn't mean anything," Meadow had said, but her voice lacked conviction. Old photos. Maybe he was checking on an ex, making sure she was safe. Look at the bank transfers. Sierra had pushed forward more documents. Monthly payments to an account in Harper's name. $50,000 a month for the last 6 years. That's not checking on an ex, Meadow. That's supporting a mistress. The numbers had swum before Meadow's eyes. $50,000 a month. While she'd been falling in love with Hajoon, while she'd been believing his story about Minaseo being his last love, while she'd been building a future with him, he'd been sending money to another woman who looked disturbingly like her. "There's more," Sierra had said gently. The investigators interviewed people in Seoul. Harper tells friends that Hajoon is the love of her life, that they're waiting for the right time to be together publicly, that his marriage to you is complicated but temporary. She believes he's coming back to her, Meadow. Listen to me right now, beautiful people. This is the moment. The moment where Meadow has to decide what she believes, who she trusts, what her marriage actually means. Drop a comment telling me what you think is really going on here. Is Hajoon cheating? Is this an elaborate setup? Hit that subscribe button because the truth is about to come out and it's going to destroy you in the best way. Stay with me, we're in the final minutes of this story. Meadow had stared at the evidence, her mind racing through every interaction with Hajoon, every conversation, every moment of vulnerability. He'd been in Seoul without her before, had business there regularly, had connections she didn't fully understand. Could he have been maintaining a relationship with Harper? Could everything between them be as false as everything with Ray had been? "I need to confront him," Meadow had said, standing abruptly. "I need to ask him directly about this." "That's why I showed you," Sierra had said. "Not to destroy your marriage, but to give you the power of knowledge. You deserved that with Ray and didn't have it. You deserve it now. Whatever Hajoon's explanation is, you'll hear it as an equal, not as someone being blindsided." Meadow had driven back to Los Angeles in a daze, her security following, her mind spinning with possibilities. She'd wanted to call Hajoon, demand answers immediately, but something made her wait. Made her want to see his face when she asked, to read his body language, to know with certainty whether this was truth or manipulation. She'd arrived at the penthouse to find Hajoon in the living room, working on his laptop, and he'd looked up with immediate concern when he'd seen her expression. "Meadow? What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "It's us," she'd said, dropping the envelope on the coffee table between them. "It's you and me and whatever the hell you've been doing in Seoul with a woman named Harper Collins. Want to explain that?" Hajoon had gone very still, his face unreadable. Then he'd opened the envelope, looked through the photos and documents with methodical precision, and when he'd looked up, his eyes had been filled with something like resignation. "I should have told you," he'd said quietly. "I knew I should have told you, but I didn't know how to explain without it sounding like exactly what you're thinking. So it's true." Meadow had felt her heart cracking. "You've been supporting another woman, seeing her, maintaining a relationship while married to me?" Yes and no. Hajoon had stood, moving toward her, but Meadow had stepped back. "Meadow, Harper is real. The money is real. But the relationship isn't what these photos suggest. Sit down, please, and let me explain everything. I owe you the complete truth." Meadow had sat, her hand on her belly, drawing strength from her daughter. "Talk." Hajoon had taken a deep breath, and when he'd started speaking, his voice had been raw with old pain. "Harper was my girlfriend before Minaseo. We met when I first came to America, fell in love fast and hard. She was everything I thought I wanted. Beautiful, strong, independent. We were together for 2 years, and I was planning to marry her." "What happened?" Meadow had asked. "My father happened," Hajoon had said bitterly. "He found out about Harper, decided a Black American woman wasn't appropriate for the heir to his organization. He had her attacked, Meadow. Had his men beat her so badly she was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Broken bones, internal injuries, trauma that never fully healed. And he told me that if I didn't end the relationship, the next attack would kill her. The horror of that had stolen Meadow's breath. So I broke up with her, Hajoon had continued, his voice hollow. Told her I didn't love her anymore, that it had been fun, but I was going back to Korea. I shattered her to save her life. And she believed it, believed I was just another man who used her and threw her away. She spiraled after that. Depression, addiction, suicide attempts. By the time I came back to America permanently, she was barely surviving. The money, Meadow had whispered, understanding beginning to dawn. The money is guilt, Hajoon had confirmed. It's trying to give her back some of what my father took. She doesn't know it's from me. The payments come through a trust, anonymous. She thinks it's compensation from some settlement. I've been trying to give her stability, safety, a life, without her knowing I'm behind it because if she knew, it would destroy her all over again. But the photos, Meadow had gestured to the evidence. You were with her in Seoul 3 months ago. I went to check on her, Hajoon had said. She'd moved to Seoul chasing some teaching opportunity. When I found out, I panicked. Seoul is my father's territory, full of people who might use her against me. I want to make sure she was safe, that she had proper security without knowing it. The photos make it look intimate, but Meadow, I was watching her from a distance. Those restaurant shots? I was 3 tables away. The park? I was following her to make sure she got home safely. I haven't spoken directly to Harper in 8 years. The investigators said she tells people you're the love of her life, Meadow had pointed out. That you're coming back to her. She might believe that, Hajoon had said sadly. I broke her heart badly enough that maybe she's been waiting for me to come back and explain it was all a lie. But I can't, Meadow. I can't tell her the truth about why I left because it would make her a target again. My father's dead now, but his organization isn't. Telling her I loved her then and had to leave her to save her life, it would only put her in danger again. The logic was sound, heartbreaking, and completely verifiable. Show me the trust documents, Meadow had said. Show me proof that the payments are anonymous. Show me phone records that you haven't been in contact. Show me something that proves this isn't an elaborate lie. Hajoon had pulled out his phone, logged into accounts, shown her documentation that backed up every word. The trust was real and anonymous. His phone records showed no calls or texts to any number associated with Harper. The security reports on her showed exactly what he'd described: protection from a distance, no direct contact. Why didn't you tell me? Meadow had asked, tears streaming down her face. Why let me find out like this? Because I was ashamed, Hajoon had said, his own voice breaking. Because I failed to protect someone I loved once, and the guilt of that has haunted me for years. Because you'd already been hurt so badly by Ray, and I didn't want you to think I was another man with secret relationships and hidden women. I should have told you, Meadow. The second we got serious, I should have explained about Harper. It was cowardice not to, and I'm sorry. Meadow had looked at this man she'd married, seen the genuine anguish in his face, the transparency of his pain, and made a choice. She chose trust. She chose believing that sometimes good people make decisions out of fear and shame. She chose her marriage over her doubt. No more secrets, she'd said firmly, standing to move into his arms. Ever. I don't care how painful or complicated or shameful. We share everything, Hajoon. That's the only way this works. No more secrets, he'd agreed, holding her like she was oxygen. I'll call Harper, explain everything, cut off the money if you want. Whatever you need to feel secure. Don't cut off the money, Meadow had said, surprising herself. She suffered because of your family. She deserves that compensation. But maybe we bring her into the light? Maybe we tell her the truth in a way that doesn't endanger her but gives her closure? Let her know she wasn't disposable, that you left to protect her, that the money isn't charity but restitution. The generosity of that had made Hajoon look at her with awe. You're extraordinary. You know that? Most women would demand I cut all ties, erase her existence. I'm not most women, Meadow had said. I'm a woman who knows what it's like to be left without answers, to believe you weren't enough. I won't do that to another woman if I can help it. 3 days later, they'd flown Harper to Los Angeles, put her up in a hotel, and Hajoon had told her everything. Meadow had watched as Harper had cried, raged, processed 8 years of pain and confusion. Had watched as understanding replaced resentment, as closure replaced the open wound of abandonment. "I don't forgive you completely," Harper had said to Hajoon at the end. "But I understand now. And thank you, Meadow, for pushing him to tell me." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Meadow had said simply. "We all deserve the truth." 2 months later, at 8 months pregnant and glowing with health and happiness, Meadow had hosted the opening of her Korean African-American Artist Showcase. The gallery had been packed with collectors, critics, and community members. Ray had shown up uninvited, sober for once, thin and desperate. "I wanted to say congratulations," he'd said quietly, standing in front of a piece featuring motherland imagery from both cultures. "On the show, the baby, all of it. You did it, Meadow. You became everything I tried to convince you that you weren't." "I always was everything," Meadow had corrected gently. "You just couldn't see it. But thank you for the acknowledgement, Ray. I hope you find whatever healing you need." He'd left without argument, and Meadow had turned back to the show, to Hajoon's hand on her lower back, to the life they'd built from the ashes of her past. Sierra had died 6 weeks later, peacefully in hospice with Meadow holding her hand. "I'm sorry," Sierra had whispered at the end. "For everything." "I'm so sorry, sister." "I forgive you," Meadow had said, and meant it. "Rest now, Sierra. It's okay to rest." Their daughter, Minesio Murcio, had been born 3 weeks later in a Los Angeles hospital, 8 pounds of perfect health and future potential. Hajoon had cried through the entire birth, had held their daughter like she was made of starlight, had whispered promises in Korean and English about protection and love and freedom to choose her own path. And Meadow, looking at her husband and daughter, had understood that healing wasn't linear. That you could survive being broken and build something beautiful. That the right love didn't fix you, but gave you space to fix yourself. That worth wasn't determined by fertility or perfection or meeting someone else's standards, but by the courage to keep choosing yourself even when the world tried to erase you. Ray had tried to make her nothing. Hajoon had helped her remember she'd always been everything. And their daughter would grow up knowing, bone deep and certain, that she was valuable exactly as she was. 3 years after the divorce, Meadow Carter stood in her Malibu beach house, watching her daughter play in the sand while her husband grilled on the deck, and felt something like peace. She'd been called barren, broken, worthless. She'd been cheated on, gaslit, discarded. But she'd survived, thrived, and built a life that honored every scar while celebrating every victory. And that, she thought, was the best revenge of all. Now listen to me, beautiful souls. If you've watched this story all the way to the end, drop a comment telling me what this meant to you. Tell me if you've ever felt worthless and found your way back to knowing your value. Hit that subscribe button because this channel is about women who refuse to stay broken, who build empires from their pain, who love fiercely and demand respect fearlessly. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their ex's opinions don't define them, that their body isn't their worth, that they're enough exactly as they are. Thank you for being here, for watching Meadow's journey, for believing with me that broken things can be reformed into something stronger. Until next time, remember, you are not what they said you were. You are what you choose to become after. Stay strong, stay fierce, and never let anyone convince you that you're anything less than extraordinary. Peace and love, beautiful people. This is just the beginning of your story.